Hello, welcome to the City Biz audience. My name's Dave Cobban. I'm proud to say that I'm the uncle of Sandy Farquharson and Tom Farquharson here, who we're going to talk to today about the paddle school and paddle in general, the industry. Hey boys, can you take us back to the beginning? What inspired you to start the paddle school, and what problems were you trying to solve in the industry?
When I first started Padel, I was one of very few English speakers that were playing the sport and coaching the sport. And I felt myself repeating my teaching advice many, many times on the court for my students. And so I thought, right, well, I'll put a video online to help people learn, to get the basics, to get an understanding of the game, technique and tactics. And what I found was that players all over the world were having similar problems at similar stages in the game. And so really, there wasn't enough advice at an early stage and quite frankly now for players learning the game about how they should improve their technique, their tactics, and really an understanding for the sport. And so that's almost how the paddle school was born, really.
Yeah, and also to talk about some of the challenges in the industry. So to give a bit of context, paddle is one of the fastest growing racket sports in the world, and there's a huge demand for paddle coaching, but there just aren't the number of coaches or the advice in English for paddle. And so it was a real opportunity in the market to provide high quality coaching in English. And so that was a real need and a real opportunity in the market. And so starting the paddle school seemed to be a great solution to solve that issue in the market.
So you've built a thriving online coaching business in, I guess, well, I think of it as a niche sport, sort of thing, but of course it's massively growing. But what were some of the biggest challenges in scaling the paddle school from when you first started, when you only had, 0 customers? How did you start to get those early adopters on board and overcome those challenges?
I think personally, if I look at the paddle school, I think of it almost as an online business and as an in-person business. And I think a big thing that we want to improve within the world of paddle, but within the realm of sport really, is this idea of hybrid learning where you learn in person, but you also have studies online, or you can send in videos and you can actually work on your game at home, whether it's through visualization or you're watching the correct technique or tutorials, things like that. And I think that one of the challenges for us at the beginning was almost finding that right balance between the in-person advice and spending time on court with players, which is obviously less scalable because you can only have so many players on court at a time, and using the demonstrations and the education that you do with those players to send it out to the world online. And obviously digitally, we can help many, many more players, and it's much more scalable. And so it was almost learning the best way to teach those players online through the experiences that we had with players on the court. And that was a little bit of a challenge at first, I felt.
Yeah, I think to add to that, if you look at how the business evolved, we started in social media. So we started with offering free content on YouTube. And just to give a bit of perspective now, we have over 500,000 social followers online, and a lot of our content is free educational training tips. And to build a SaaS model, because that's essentially what we built, to offer content which people have to pay for, that's quite a big challenge, because a lot of the kickback from people, in a lot of customers and people in the industry was, well, why would I pay for something when your content is so good and it's free? So why would I sign up for a SaaS model? I think we really took the approach that our social media were tips. They were tips. They might work for you. They might not work for you. But we wanted to make paddle coaching and education accessible to everyone. And we created this SaaS model, this subscription model, as a way of personalizing digital coaching. So if you look at our membership now, there are courses that take players from beginner level up to advanced, but you also can send in your videos for analysis. And it's a much more digital but personalized approach, and really for those players that want that extra coaching from us personally. And so that was really our between social media. And I mean, Sandy, if we look back at now, our SaaS model subscription it's turning over six figures, which when we started off, it certainly wasn't. And so there's been a lot of learnings for us, particularly as paddle coaches. Learning how to grow a SaaS business was a bit of a steep learning curve at times, but it's certainly paid off.
Yeah. I mean, for every entrepreneur out there, I've been watching these guys grow, and Tom will give you. I'm sure you'll appreciate you're now able to talk about SaaS models and cost per acquisition and all that kind of stuff. Which, to start with, of course, you were much more of the expert in the sport and the training and things like that. And so now that you're learning all that business stuff as well, it's amazing to watch. Actually, it's fantastic. And you guys are brothers, obviously. Fantastic facial hair, you got that going on. But how do you? I mean, do you guys get on well? Do you fight? How do you mix up responsibilities? Are you kind of complementing each other, or do you find it like you send Tom off to do something else and Sandy will go? How does that work for you guys?
I think we've got a lot of experience, Tom, haven't we, of working together. We were both from tennis, and I used to coach Tom in tennis, and then over time we did the same in paddle, and now we work together and we know each other very, very well. And I think it's almost, we know what we're good at, and we know where areas of weaknesses of ourselves and of each other. And so I think almost as we've worked more and more in the business, I think we've become more and more aware of those areas. And there are some things that I start a project and I think, oh, this is much more suited to Tom. The way his analytical thinking and the way that he would approach this. And I imagine, or I hope, there are probably times when Tom thinks, God, I wish Sandy were doing this because he would find this situation more comfortable. And I think that as we've developed as a business and also as entrepreneurs, as business people ourselves, we are hopefully finding our way into those roles.
No, I completely agree. And actually a book, Sandy, that you and I read, and we always refer back to is this E-Myth. The E-Myth is a book that a great read if you are an entrepreneur. And I like to think of Sandy as the visionary of this business, and I'm more of the operator. And I think that the more we've been involved in startups, the more that you start to see that, especially when I think there's two co-founders or there's two people, I think it's really important to have that balance. I think if you have two visionaries and you have all these discussions and there's so many ideas that we can come up with, but unless you have that operator or someone that actually puts it in, and Sandy comes up with a lot of creative ideas that I just don't. It's not a strength of mine. I'm very much I'm looking to operate and implement. So I think we do complement each other like that.
I would just almost say off the back of that as well, that when we heard that expression, I think it was a bit of a sigh of relief for us, wasn't it, Tom? Because at the time we were both running around trying to do both. And I think that when the moment we said, okay, you are better at this, you are, the operator, anything that's operation related, you take on that, and anything that might involve, that creative side, or in a way, a lot of, people management and being the face of things. It's almost like, oh, it's easier if I just deal. It's easier for me to deal. I prefer to do it. And almost, I think, the moment we knew that and understood it, it was a sigh of relief. And we're like, okay, I can do this part now, I know, rather than us both trying to juggle both areas.
So paddle is, of course, I mean, we're starting to see it. I'm starting to see it everywhere, and conversations and in West Coast USA, obviously East Coast USA is starting to really pick up on paddle, but it's growing in popularity worldwide. And so for entrepreneurs out there who may be thinking about sport as a potential sort of industry that they might be interested in doing work in, what do you see the opportunity in paddle as?
I think, first of all, I might almost explain, why I think paddle is growing so rapidly around the world. And I think because it's technically easy to learn, and and it's very sociable, and in your mind, as in America, you think, yep, so's pickleball. And I think that where paddle differs is that as you get better and better, it becomes more tactical and more mental, and the nuances of the tactics are very complex. And the fact that you've got the glass behind you and you've got corners and you have a fence that you have to deal with, and so your shot selection becomes so much more varied. Like when we coach high level and we talk about a certain shot, the answer is almost inevitably it depends on the game situation, your opponents, where they are, the speed of the ball. There's so many nuances to the tactical side of it. And so, for Tom and myself who have come from professional sport in a different sport like tennis, it's a constant learning of tactics and improvement throughout. And I think that challenge, both mentally and physically throughout, is very appealing to entrepreneurs, but to anyone that wants to be challenged with their sport, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. And I think almost to add a wider business perspective to it, and why the market's so attractive. I actually think back to when, before Sandy, before I even got involved in the paddle school, and I remember doing, I was a consultant prior to joining, and I remember I looked at all these data reports on paddle and looking at the growth of the game, and this is obviously some years ago now, but if you look at, for example, where paddle is in the US, all you have to do is look at the growth of paddle that happened in Europe, the growth in the Middle East, and if you look at the data in those markets where paddle has grown, you actually see that paddle very quickly has overtaken tennis in many markets. If you look at Scandinavia, if you look at where paddle is established already, Spain, Argentina, it's bigger than tennis in those markets where it's established. And so it is definitely one of those markets where we're in this kind of early adopter stage. But I think if you look at the data across the world, it's very exciting, because I think it genuinely can challenge tennis. And it'll be interesting to see the US market. Like Sandy said, there's pickleball already. So a lot of people are saying, is that going to compete with paddle? But I think that the growth is real. The data across the world is showing that this sport is here to stay. And like Sandy said, there's so many elements to the sport that make it a long-term sport that people enjoy playing.
I just came back from the Aussie Open tennis, and it was incredible to see how well organized and well put together it was from the physical experience to the digital experience, etc. But paddle, as it is emerging in the US as well, for entrepreneurs, where's the biggest area of growth? Is it in the coaching? Is it in the clubs, building the clubs, or media element, or something I'm not even thinking about?
It's a good question, and I think it is such a wide open market that this is, I've been involved in so many different areas, even in my time in the sport. I've manufactured rackets, and I've worked with court manufacturers in their installations, and we've gone down that brand route, and we've been involved with building clubs, and I think it's very difficult to say. I think a lot of the investors in the game now are either trying to build big clubs. The difficulty in the US, the UK, is almost the expense of that land or the planning regulations required. And then often what they do is they build a big club, and then it's an afterthought as to how they're going to run it. Or they're going into the media side, and because we briefly touched on the idea of this professional tour. It's in its infancy, and so now you're starting to see the emergence of these like super leagues and exhibition style tournaments where you have a celebrity or an A-lister who is the team owner and things like that. A little bit where pickleball has gone, and so there's an area there as well that has potential. The brands are difficult though, because these Spanish companies have had them for so many years. Like they've had them for 40, 50 years. So they're very established within the sport. It's not to say there isn't an opportunity there, but it's a challenge for a new entrant.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and Sandy, we talk about this a lot in paddle as an industry. There's a sort of shiny object syndrome where there are literally so many areas you could go into. And if you are an entrepreneur looking into getting into paddle, and I think it's also market to market. I think it, for example, if you look at the US, such a huge market, such a huge potential. Every business we speak to, particularly in Europe, is looking at the US and thinking, if the US picks up paddle and takes it, this is going to be where the sport really takes off. And so I don't know if I can put a finger on exactly where the market looks most attractive. I think it depends what problem you're solving. For us particularly, it's coaching is a huge opportunity for us, and the digital side means that we can provide coaching to players on scalable as the sport grows. And so the more players that play the game, that it's great for us because all players need coaching. And so, I think there's lots of opportunities. I think, I think it's also market dependent as well.
Very cool. Okay, so Boynton Beach, your first coaching academy. The British are coming over to the United States. I've been here for 17 years now, and it's always entertaining when those Brits come over. They love connecting with us. And what's your vision for Boynton Beach, and why Boynton Beach? Why the location?
I mean, I've been a few times to Miami for Padel, and I had enjoyed it. And I mean, I've seen the growth over the last few years of the game of Padel within Miami. And it was a very Spanish affair. Like it's very South American. It's very, a lot of Mexican influence. And so if you go and play in Miami, almost certainly the majority of the club is Spanish, like Spanish speaking. You just hear Spanish all around you. And then when we travelled, the first time I came, I had a look at Boynton Beach, and we moved further up north. And immediately in the sporting venues, it becomes more American. And it's in that area. It's an area that's quite well known for its tennis academies. It's quite close to the Chris Evert Tennis Academy. And that whole coastline is it becomes more and more American, and it's open to sport. They love sport in that region, and so we just felt like we knew that there would be an element that would mean we'd have to build awareness, because there was no paddle at the time, and so we knew that. At the beginning, it's a lot about, right, okay, we're going to have to teach people what the game is and how to get started and everything like that, where you wouldn't have to do that in Miami. But we felt like the audience and the demographic there was perfect for the game to grow.
Yeah, completely agree. And actually, Dave, I'm in Florida at the moment, so I've been here for a few weeks, and so I'm getting to know the market here. And like Sandy said, I think it's a really interesting dynamic with pickleball, because you get a lot of players over here that are very much committed to pickleball and they don't want to have another sport in their life. But then I think you also have the tennis players that are looking for something else. They play tennis for a long time. They try paddle, and I think definitely a big opportunity here is transitioning tennis players to paddle. Sandy, myself, did the same. Sandy, you haven't hit a tennis ball in years. Neither have I, because once we started paddle, that was it for us. And I think there's definitely an opportunity. We know how addictive the sport can be. And I think definitely in the Boynton area, there's a lot of tennis players that I think could try the sport and get addicted as well.
And is Boynton Beach a one and done, or is there opportunities for you to sort of grow the model of academies within the paddle school? Would you expand to more locations? Talk to us about that.
I think the plan would definitely be to do that. I know that we started in Boynton with the vision that we wanted to create a high quality blueprint of our system and our coaching program and our education of the coach and the whole model fitting together with how the operations of a club should look like. So we spent a lot of time on this academy, both in the preparation, but also, once it's been launched. And so the idea being that we will then have that blueprint so that we can repeat it in the future. That's definitely the plan.
Yeah, and I think just going back to the academy vision itself, I think it's interesting because at the start of this conversation, we talked about the online versus in person. And I think that many of the values and the mission we had with our online platform was to provide as many players as possible with the best coaching advice they can get. And I think that what we've done with our academies, and this is our first academy in the US, which is very exciting, is we've now got a place in person that we can provide people with coaching. And what we're really doing at this academy is we're training the coaches there to the highest standard in the industry. We have our own unique coaching methodology, and the coaches at the academy are trained in that methodology. And I think what separates our coach education from other coach educators is that most coach education, you go and get a 2-day certificate and you're a paddle coach. Now you go and work at a club, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're a good coach. And it was a massive frustration for us just seeing that, because we saw so many coaches getting certified and thinking the players are the ones suffering, and the players are not getting the advice that they need. And so a big part of our academy vision is to allow players and enable players to have access to the best coaches. And our coach education is ongoing. Coaches go through a certification, but we're constantly giving them online support. They have to get recertified every year. They have access to all of our online content. Their education is ongoing. It isn't just a 2-day certificate. And so we know that our coaches, our academies are the best in the world. And we also go there as well to deliver in-person coaching. So definitely the plan is to expand. We want to essentially put the player at the heart of this and make sure that the coaches at our academies are the best in the world.
Yeah, because that element of the balance between digital and physical, I know that we've talked about it a lot. Is that it's the perennial investment question: is how do we invest more in the digital side, or because the digital can scale very easily and the physical is harder to do so. And I think looking at golf, I mean, we've looked at golf as an example of that, but as which do that balance well. But what's the process that you can share with other entrepreneurs that you go through in thinking about how to push one or both platforms forward?
I think a lot of this comes down to, and any entrepreneurs that are thinking about whether it's social media or their business, and I've heard this many times. And at the beginning, you think, okay, know your audience. Knowing our audience is key, because we're in Boynton Beach, and like I said, our audience in Boynton Beach is completely different to Miami, and it's completely different to London and Spain and the rest of the world. And so it's almost like understanding that our audience is different and what programs they need in order to establish themselves. I probably wouldn't need an 8-week get started program in Miami, because almost everyone there has played it, and there'll be much more intermediate and more advanced work. But somewhere else I might do. And so I think a big part of this is knowing your audience and tailoring what we do, whether it's online or digital, online or in person, to that audience is key, really, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the digital space is so exciting. And I think in the years to come with AI, it's just going to be completely different to what it is today. And so I think that in a way, I think that's a great thing, but it also means that if you think of where we started growing the online from social media all those years ago to in the future, even like in 5 years, the editing capability, the fact that you can use AI to go lots of different languages in an instant, I'm sure all these aspects are coming in. I think a big thing for us, and I think for entrepreneurs out there as well, is, like Sandy said, the importance of community, but also the importance of brand, because I think that the competitive advantage that perhaps some people might have in terms of editing capabilities, in terms of having a team around you, a social media team, I feel like all of these barriers are gonna start to break down in the future. And I think that if you have the brand and you have the brand value there and the community, I think that's going to be a huge thing, whether you're doing online or in person. And so that's been a big focus for us, is growing that brand and growing that brand loyalty.
Yeah, to build on that question, I think almost sort of describing a blueprint in a way to how you can start a business in a new sport or in a new industry. I mean, what has that evolution been like from, the things like you mentioned, Sandy, about like getting to know that audience early? So I think what's been your evolution as you've gone from, 5 people subscribing to the digital platform to hundreds and hundreds? What are the sort of the top 3 things you say to an entrepreneur if they're breaking into a new industry that they've got to do?
I've often thought about this in terms of Padel. Like when we advise people how how to improve their paddle. If we were to go on court and we say, right, what would be your tips to improve your paddle? I would say, right, first, patience. Like, just be patient. Like, you're not going to get it in an instant. You're not going to be doing what all the pros do. And so, if you can be patient at the beginning, then that's that for me is a real key. A lot of people say, "Oh, I'm going to start a YouTube channel." I say, "Okay, perfect. I understand that." We made videos every week for 5 years, and only on year 5 do we actually start, seeing something from that, right? And so, and then the next is it's consistency. It's almost like patience and consistency for paddle are huge, but I think as well for business, it's really like, if you think it's the right thing to do and you think that this is going to be a direction for you, anything I think that is built on good, solid, consistent foundations, and you're patient over time, then I think you can achieve what you want. But it's almost this idea of instant gratification, both learning paddle but also in business, that makes it difficult.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think that it's, tying into that is consistency. And I also think embracing uncertainty. If I look at your journey, Sandy, you picked up paddle, you started in paddle when hardly any other country was playing the sport. And so you took a real risk to, you're working in tennis, you had worked with pro players in tennis, and you discovered the sport, you fell in love with the sport and thought, this is such an addictive sport, it can't help but grow. But at the time, everyone said, wait, you're a paddle coach? What are you doing? You've spent your whole career in tennis, and now you're going to jump into a sport you've hardly played. Obviously this is going over a decade ago, but I think there's definitely that there has to be an element of stepping out of the known and taking that risk. And it feels so cliche because you read all of these entrepreneurial books and they're all about taking risks. And I think it's just true. If you have that belief and you have that passion for something, there's a whole lot of consistency and grind you have to go through. But I do think there's an element of, if you've got that secure job, if you've got that secure salary, but you really want to do something and it's going to be a bit of a risk, you do just have to jump in. But like Sandy said, don't expect to see results straight away. You have to be willing to grind it out.
To add to that, it's almost like, in a way, you've got to enjoy that grind and enjoy that fight. Like you and I, Tom, we both come from like professional tennis backgrounds, and it's almost like when you're fighting and you're playing, you're losing points, and you've got to almost remember that, remember where you are and what you're doing, and enjoy it. Because there's many times that we've had with the business as well, where we've been like, oh my God, another week like this is it is a hard graft. But you almost got to say to yourself, like, you're enjoying this. You could be in a lot worse situation. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that. There was, because what I thought was brilliant is I was expecting you to give an answer that was a little bit more business focused, but actually, it's the values you've got to hold dear, so that you've got to have the passion and enjoyment of the subject that you're going to entrepreneur in. You've got to be consistent. You've got to be patient, and then embrace those uncertainties that are going to come, like those weeks that you sort of have. That was really insightful, actually. Thank you for that. So, looking ahead, what's in store for the paddle school? Can you kind of outline what you see as the next few years for you?
It's funny, when we started with the paddle school, we did a lot of projecting of the next year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, etc. And it's been such a fast moving sport and business and area and ourselves, the development of ourselves, that I don't know about you, Tom, but I'm always a bit cautious about being, going too far in advance of where we will be in however many years. But I do know that, we're going to take the passion that we've had for this academy and try to grow that and try to help more players. And I think that if this, this feels like the right direction for us, like Tom said, if you feel like it's the right direction, let's go for it. We jump in with both feet and we say, right, we're going to go down this academy approach, and we're going to grow the coach education, the teams that work with players, and that way we can help more players. And we know that the online side of things, this idea of hybrid learning, we know it works because we've used it with so many players up to this point, and we've helped their game so much, and we've got so many people that have come to us and been really thankful for how it's developed their game, that we know that that's the right direction. So we're just going to keep trying to unlock that for as many players as we can.
Yeah, and I think looking at the sport in general, I think that we know if you've never tried the sport, then do go and try it. But once you try the sport, it is so much fun. It's super addictive, and I think that in the next 5 years, I just think the sport is going to grow. It's going to see a massive growth, I think, across the world, in the US too. And I think that we've got our first academy in the US, which is very exciting. I think in 5 years' time, hopefully we'll have many more academies. We'll be helping many more players online, both through social media as well as on our membership platform. And I think at the end of the day, we want to be there as the sport grows and to provide the best education for players and coaches. So I think we'll see a lot more members on our platform, hopefully more people following us on social media, and hopefully scale our academies as well.
Brilliant. Tom, Sandy, thank you so much for your insights and your sharing your experiences of the Padel School and the future, the past, present, and the future. Thank you to the CityBiz team and the CityBiz audience for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation and it inspires you to start your own startup in Padel or in other sports.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.